Hello there. Welcome again to our series, Be Healthy for Life. And today we're going to be talking about becoming more physically active. One of my favorite topics because it's one of the positive things we can do to help build our health and to really prevent disease and to feel your best and be most productive. And we're going to look at the research that shows that. First of all, I like this little quotation you'll see there from Ellen White, written many years ago. She was one of our early pioneers that wrote on healthy living, and I think she put it in just a very succinct one sentence there, the value of this. He says, proper periods of sleep and rest and an abundance of physical exercise are essential to health of body and mind. So we need our rest, and then we need the exercise. You put the two together, and that really helps the body to have good health. Nike did a similar ad. Remember, they had just a simple one. It said, sleep, eat, and then exercise as hard as you can. Although they used a couple other different words. But it was the idea. You put those together, and that's what stimulates the body to have the best health possible. Our problem, though, is that most Americans are inactive. Notice that only a fourth of Americans, or a fourth of them, don't get any exercise at all, and only 1 in 5 get the recommended amount. And the recommended amount is the minimum amount that you need. So we can quickly see that most people don't get adequate exercise to have the best health. Research has shown that it's estimated about 230,000 deaths per year are attributed to a lack of regular physical activity. That's a lot of people, isn't it? That's about as many people, I think there's just a few more than that who've died from COVID here this year in the epidemic. But that's a lot of people. And so many more people could be benefiting from the benefit of exercise. So research has shown that if we sit less and move more, we're going to live longer. And that's what we're going to look at. So here's the first one, sitting too much. It's not only being active that we need to do, but we also need to avoid the long periods of sitting. And this is an interesting study of about 200 and some thousand people. They simply found out how long they sat each day, and then after 10 years, they plotted their mortality rates. And notice that if they're less than 8 hours a day of sitting, mortality was quite low, but when it got to 8 hours or more, notice the risk goes up to 15 or even 40% increase in mortality. And that was true even if people exercised. So the idea of being sedentary, sitting too much, is not good. We need to get up. We need to move around. We need to take breaks frequently. And that will help our health as well as the exercise, which we'll get to. First, I'd like to look at this little verse from John. It's a story about Jesus, and he approaches the man who was paralyzed, you remember, laying by the pool. And Jesus asked him this question, and I like the way he puts it. He says, would you like to get well? Is that a good question? I think we probably have all answered that ourselves in some time in our life. If I could just feel better, if I could just get well. And here's Jesus' answer to him. He says, stand up, pick up your mat, and what? And walk. Interesting little formula. And that same formula works today. If you want to get well, I'm going to suggest that you get up and go walking. It's good therapeutic medicine. And as we look at the research, we'll see that that is true. One of the things that exercise does is it improves our circulation. As we're exercising, the muscles are contracting, squeezing the blood back up to the heart. The blood is circulating around much faster, of course, when we're exercising. The heart is beating harder. And all of that, improving the circulation, improves the nutritional status of every cell in our body. And here's this quote again from Ellen White. God designed that the living machinery should be in daily activity. Notice that word daily. That doesn't mean once a week, twice a week. Every day we need to be active. For in this activity or motion is its preserving power. The more we exercise, the better will be the circulation of the blood. And another statement, she says, the better the circulation, the better our health. Every cell is nourished by that blood as it goes around, oxygen, the nutrients, and so on. And so exercise improves the circulation. And of course, what do more people die from than anything else? Yeah, it's poor circulation, isn't it? Lack of blood, becoming plugged perhaps and going to the heart or the brain or the kidneys or other vital organs. Those organs die, and that's the end of the life. So keeping our circulation healthy is essential for good life. Now here's just a few things, just to put it in perspective. Exercise has many benefits, and we'll look at these. First of all, it helps you look and feel your best. And that's important, isn't it? If we could just stop there, that would be good. If you look better, if you feel better, if you perform better, and that's the next one, gives you more energy. I think we could all use more energy. I know I could use more energy. One of the reasons I exercise. It prevents many serious diseases, and we'll look at each one of those. It's amazing how exercise helps to prevent those. It's also good for mental health because it can help relieve stress and help us to have better mental health, feel better about ourselves, be happier, more positive attitude, less depressed, those kinds of things. And so let's take a look at this and see how exercise can help our health. First one here is a simple study that simply looked at hours of walking per week. That's easy, isn't it? And this was in a group of 72,000 women. And you can notice there on the bottom of the chart, those who exercised no hours per week, those who got just 1 hour per week, did it make a difference? It did, didn't it? It dropped down there about 30%. If they got 3 hours per week, that's about a half an hour, at least 5 or more days per week. That's the goal for Americans. It cut the risk of a heart attack in half. Now, is that good news? It is for me. If I can cut my risk of a heart attack in half, that's what I'd like to do. And what happened if they got more exercise? Well, it dropped even a little more, didn't it? But notice most of the benefit came in that first half an hour a day. If you got more than that, there's some benefit. But it's good to know that you don't have to run marathons. You don't have to do long, hard things. Regular exercise, even at a half an hour a day, makes a significant difference. Another way of tracking our exercise is a little step counter. And maybe you have a Fitbit, or I've got another little kind here on my watch, and it keeps track of my steps. And I'm just going to push the button here now, and it says I have 9,060 steps so far today, so I've got 1,000 more steps sometime today to get my 10,000 goal, which is my personal goal. But here researchers took a large group of people, noticing 16,000 over the age of 62. For over 4 years, they had a little instrument that actually measured their steps every day so that it was very accurate. And then 4 years later, they looked at mortality levels from any cause, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, whatever it might be. And notice that as the number of steps on the bottom of that graph there goes up from 2,700 for those who didn't do hardly any exercise, up to 8,400 and some, maybe these were seniors. Notice what happens to mortality. It comes down, doesn't it? So by the time they get up around 8,000 steps a day, where they said as a rule 7,500, mortality rate dropped by over half, a 58% reduction. Is that good news again? It is, isn't it? And so a lot of people like to keep steps. I like to do that. It's easy. I can look at it throughout the day. I see how I'm doing. And it's not only the exercise I do in the morning, by walking is what I enjoy doing. My wife and I will walk together for an hour or so most mornings. But it's also what we do during the day. And if I sit too long at the computer, I like to jump up, walk around a little bit, take a couple of 3 minutes, get the blood stirring, and then get back to maybe some other work. And so that keeps those steps all day long. And so if you have a goal, and I'd like to suggest if you're a senior working towards at least 7,500 or 8,000 steps a day, you'll cut your risk of any cause of death in the next few years in half or more. That's good news, isn't it? All right. So what can we do then to be more active? And this is just some suggestions of not exercising all at once, but just little things throughout the day. Sometimes it helps, instead of always sitting all day, if you have a sit-to-stand desk. And I have one at home. I can take my computer and I can stretch it up and I can work for a while. And after half an hour or an hour, if I get tired, I can push it down and rest a little bit. And so I'm not just sitting all day. And in my company, I have a software company. We have about 40, 50 employees. All of our employees have these kinds of desks so that they don't have to sit all day, because we're finding out that sitting is hazardous to your health. Some people have called sitting too much as the new smoking. It shortens our lifespan. Taking a walk after each meal, very good. Not only does it get us up and moving, but that's when the blood is kind of sluggish. It also helps to burn up extra calories, burn up especially the blood sugar levels, to bring them down a little bit so they don't get too high. Good for our health. So you can see a number of things there. We won't read every one of them, but when your cell phone rings, maybe we can jump up and walk around while we're talking to somebody. Don't have to be tethered to that cord, and so that gives us a chance to do that. If you're watching TV for a long period of time, what can you do? Well, I keep a few weights right in the front room, and if after I sit for a while, I'll jump up and I'll do some little exercises and just get the blood stirring so that we're not always sitting. I also have a stationary bicycle that's in the room where the TV is, and sometimes I'll get on there and ride for half an hour and watch the news or whatever I'm watching. And these are ways that we can decrease our time for sitting and increase our activity throughout the day. So think about those kinds of activities as well as what we're going to be talking about in our regular exercise program. Now let's look at some research. The first one here is on physical activity and your cholesterol level. What happens if our cholesterol level gets too high? Well, the blood begins to accumulate in our arteries, doesn't it? And those little openings, they get smaller and smaller because the cholesterol deposits in there, and pretty soon when the blood can't get through, then of course that's what may cause a heart attack. Or more likely, the blood will clot in those narrowed places, and when that clot happens, suddenly a person has a heart attack, and hopefully it won't be fatal, but it's a serious condition, isn't it? That's what we want to prevent. So keeping our cholesterol levels low is important. Now notice on this chart on the left, the blue represents people who are low fit. They're not getting much exercise. And the green are those who are exercising. All right? Notice if you have normal cholesterol, those who have the yellow or the high fit, a significant decrease in mortality. This was a study of Aerobic Research Center in Texas where they looked at 25,000 men over almost 20 years. So a very careful study. Now, but you look at the one on the right, notice the high cholesterol. Now, the people who don't exercise, that blue chart, is almost twice as high as the yellow one, isn't it? That means twice as many people with high cholesterol will die during that time who are sedentary. But notice the yellow chart from the normal cholesterol to the high cholesterol. As long as they're exercising, even if their cholesterol went up a little bit, mortality didn't climb, did it? So exercise protects. And so I tell people, if you can't get your cholesterol down where you'd like it to be, what can you do? Well, you can exercise, and that brings it down. Now, one more connection. Look at the yellow chart on the right-hand side, people with high cholesterol who are active, and compare that in mortality to the normal cholesterol, but they're sedentary. Who has a higher risk of dying? Well, the people who have normal cholesterol but aren't exercising, more likely to die than the person who has high cholesterol but who's fit from exercise. Another good news, isn't it? Exercise is very protective in that sense. The same thing is true with blood pressure. We won't take so much time to evaluate it, but just take the yellow chart on the far right. That's the people who are highly fit and who have high blood pressure. Compare that to the people who have normal blood pressure but who aren't exercising. Notice again, even if you have high blood pressure but you're exercising, your risk of dying is lower than the person who has normal blood pressure but doesn't get the regular exercise. It shows a very good benefit. Exercise is medicine, isn't it? Preventive medicine. Same thing on smoking. Notice the one on the right? The smoker who exercises actually has a lower risk of dying than the non-smoker who is sedentary. Whoa, is that something? That's kind of almost sounds immoral or irreligious or something, doesn't it? But a smoker who's exercising regularly actually has a lower mortality rate than the non-smoker, but doesn't get out and get his exercise. It gives us something to think about, doesn't it? Okay. Now, how about some other things? Cancer. I'm sure we all are interested in preventing cancer as much as we can. And here's a very interesting study, also, I believe, done at the same research center, where they took 14,000 women, almost 15,000, over a period of 16 years. They actually put them on a treadmill and tested their fitness level. So it wasn't just a reported, they actually knew how fit they were. And then they divided them into these three groups: low fit, moderately fit, and high fit. And after almost 16 years later, notice how those mortality levels dropped in the moderate and high fit group. So even if you just do moderate exercise, maybe not every day, but 20 or 30 minutes most days, you'll cut your risk of breast cancer by a third. Is that good news, ladies? I think it is, isn't it? And if you get high exercise, if you're getting that 30 to 40 to 50 minutes most days of the week of a good brisk walking or something equivalent to that, notice that the risk drops down to a 55% reduction in breast cancer mortality. So that's good news. Exercise is protective to our body. It seems to help the immune system, helps the body to fight cancer and all kinds of other kinds of problems, a big benefit. If you take all cancer, and this is in the same research group, only this time with men, 25,000 men, over 10 years, and they find the same kind of thing, not just breast cancer, but any cancer. Notice as your exercise level goes up, a significant drop, over half, in decrease in mortality from any cancers. Here's a study that came out just recently in JAMA Internal Medicine, and they looked at the beneficial effects of exercise in reducing cancer, and they found 13 cancers that were significantly decreased in people who exercised versus people who didn't. And you can see the list down there. Everything from esophagus and liver and lung and kidney, stomach, endometrium, leukemia, colon cancer, bladder cancer, breast cancer, they're all significantly lower. And so this is good news. If you want to prevent cancer, one of the positive things we can do is exercise every day. Again, it helps the circulation, keeps the cells healthy, helps the immune system, everything that we can do to keep our body healthy, and it's less likely to break down and have disease. Well, how about hip fractures? Have you known someone who's had a hip fracture? It's usually pretty serious, isn't it? And I hope that's something that never happens to me, but I've seen it in friends. In fact, our neighbor across the street this last year broke his hip, and I got to see firsthand how devastating that can be. Notice here, as they simply measured in this group of 61,000 women over 12 years, the amount of hours, in this case, of brisk walking per week. And the one on the left are the inactive groups. And then again, you can see as the number of hours goes up of walking per week, what happens to the risk. It's just a perfect stair step down, isn't it? The more hours you spend walking briskly, putting stress on those bones, which helps to strengthen them and encourages those bones to be stronger and build the calcium up in them, so that they have less risk of breakage and cancer, not cancer, but osteoporosis and fractures. So notice by the time you're getting 3 to 4 hours a week, that would be about a half an hour most days. Or if you got a little more than that, even getting 5 or 6 hours, which might be 40 or 50 minutes a day, notice that the risk drops in half. So one of the positive things we can do to keep our bones strong is get regular exercise. How about osteoarthritis of the knee pain? As we get older, we see more of that. Does exercise cause more knee pain, or does it help prevent it? And that's what this study looked like, again, in JAMA, just in this very year in 2020. And they looked at the risk of developing arthritis of the knee in over 1,000 people. And they compared people with regular exercise with those who didn't get exercise. Now the chart on the right is a little different than we've been looking at, but if you look there, it has a line down on the right-hand side on the number 1. 1 means no risk. It's neither higher nor lower. That's the measuring line. That's where everything is started from. And if it's to the left of that, it shows it's decreased risk. Anything to the right would show an increased risk. So they look at the different types of exercise. If they did any strenuous physical activity, notice that there was a 34% decrease in risk of osteoarthritis of the knee. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes people say, well, don't exercise. It might cause your knees to be sore as you get older. Well, it actually helps to prevent it. And even if they adjust it for all of the risk factors, it still was down about a 25% decrease. And then if they take low to moderate exercise, notice that it was just as good, or in fact, maybe even a little bit better. About a, 56% decrease in risk of arthritis. So if you want your joints to be healthy, what can you do? Like everything else in the body, if it's exercise, moderately in this case, is probably best for preventing knee pain and arthritis on a regular basis, helps to keep those joints healthy. Another major problem in the United States is diabetes, one of the top leading 10 causes of death in the United States. And this shows the relative protective role of exercise in development of diabetes. In this case, they took 70,000 women again over 10 years, and they've measured their level of physical activity, and we call these by quintiles. Quintile is simply 1/20th. So the number 1 represents the 20% of the people who got the least amount of exercise, and then as it goes to the right, those are the next 20% and so on of people who get more and more exercise. So by the time you're getting down there, the number 4, those people, that's the 80% of the the 40% of the top population who are getting more exercise, and then the last one is the 20% of the people who get the most exercise. So it's taking from the least to the most, and every time there's an increase in physical activity, what happens to the risk of diabetes? It comes down, doesn't it? It cuts the risk in half. Well, that's good news. If you don't want to get diabetes, if you have family history of diabetes, or maybe if your doctor says you already have pre-diabetes or something, which is a large segment of our population, then this is something we can do to help it from going on to have full diabetes. By the way, if you already have diabetes and you exercise, the same data shows your risk of dying if you exercise regularly compared to those who don't is cut in half. So it's very, very protective. The next one is dementia. As we get older, how's the brain doing? We want to keep the brain healthy, don't we? And I'm sure we've all known people who have had trouble with that, and it's a problem that's very common. We see it. One reason is because we simply live longer now and we have more older people. But some older people get dementia and some don't. And particularly Alzheimer's disease, we'd like to prevent that. And what we're finding is that exercise is probably the most promising thing we can do to keep the brain healthy, functioning well throughout our lifespan. And that's what this shows here. This is, again, notice there, 14,000 women, 45,000 men, 17 years of follow-up. They put them on treadmills, again, to actually test them. And that's always a better test than taking people's word for how much they exercise, a little more accurate, a little more objective. And notice that as they are moderately fit, it doesn't mean that they're the highest, it's about in the middle, more than a 50% drop. Isn't that interesting? And highly fit was about the same. So again, showing that even moderate exercise just as effective as the strenuous exercise, keeping the brain healthy and helping to prevent dementia. To me, again, that's encouraging because a lot of times people think, what can I do for the brain? Well, one of the best things we can do is exercise on a regular basis. Well, this last slide here just simply looks at walking, protecting against early mortality from any cause. Diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, stroke, whatever it might be. And again, they're looking at actual physical activity minutes per day equivalent to brisk walking. And in this large group of people, notice how large it is, 654,000 people. That's a lot of people, isn't it? Over a period of 10 years. And notice as they go from no exercise to 10, 15, 30, and 60 minutes a day, how that drops. And what's the last one there? 90 minutes. That would be the person who's well motivated. That's about what I try to do a day. I do about 45 minutes in the morning and another 45 minutes in the evening. I like to ride my bike in the evening, and that gives me about an hour and a half a day. I need it. As I get older, I find that is very helpful to me. So every time you increase your activity level, you're investing in your health, and your risk of dying drops. So again, very positive information that exercise is good for us. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge to look at that chart and figure it out. And I simply ask people oftentimes, looking at that chart, what would you recommend most Americans do? Well, at least get 30 minutes a day. If you want the best benefits, work more towards maybe even an hour a day. Well, how about if we're seniors? Same kind of a study, 12 years, 2,600 seniors, and they again divided them into these groups from lowest fit to highest fit, every quintile through there, and this time it's measuring their actual aerobic capacity in METs. And notice as their exercise level goes from low fit to high fit, every time there's an increase in exercise, what happens to the mortality? Even a more dramatic drop than the last one, isn't it? And the reason it's more dramatic is because it's been tested on the treadmill rather than, again, taking a questionnaire and asking people how much they exercise. People who are the most fit down there, well, even the last two categories, 60 to 73% decrease in mortality. Is that worthwhile? I think it is, isn't it? So if we want to live a long, full life and enjoy all those years, we need to be exercising regularly. So now here's some guidelines. This is from the Center of Disease Control and their physical activity guidelines for Americans. And so just a little bit complicated here, but let's try to look at it quickly. It says every U.S. adult, doesn't say most, half, it says all of us need exercise, should accumulate at least 150 to 300 minutes or more of moderate intensity physical activity, such as brisk walking, every week. Now, if we went out a half an hour, at least for 5 days a week, that would be the 150 minutes. So that's kind of the minimum. That's what we need, just to get by the minimum of what we need to stay in health. If you want more benefits, you can get twice that much. That might be going out 7 days a week. I try to exercise most every day, and I might put in a little more time than just 30 minutes. It might be 40 or 45 minutes, or 50 minutes, sometimes an hour. And that adds up, and we get more benefit. It says, or accumulating 115 minutes per week of vigorous activity like running. Now, running, I did that for years. About 30 or 35 years, I ran about 6 miles every morning. I was into marathoning in those days, and that was just my regular routine. Take me about an hour. And by running, you cover more distance more quickly, don't you? And so you get more benefit, so you don't need as much time because you're doing it. Now, walking will do the same thing, it just takes a little longer. And we don't have to go a whole hour. So 115 minutes of jogging, that might be 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times per week, could do something like that. Or it says do a combination of both. And then notice the last one there, plus we also need muscle strengthening activities for the legs, hips, back, abdomen, chest. In other words, all the body needs regular exercise, at least how often? At least twice a week. And if we do that, that stimulates the body to stay in good health. Now, the Institute of Medicine has also put out some guidelines, and this was particularly in relationship to managing our weight. In the United States, we have a weight problem. I think we all realize that. About half or 2/3 of us are either overweight or obese. So we need to bring that down. And so what they're recommending is to prevent weight gain and to gain optimal health benefits from physical activity, 60 minutes of daily moderate intensity physical activity is recommended. So that's why sometimes they recommend them more, and that's the reason I need more. When I was jogging and running my 6 miles a day, I never had to worry about my weight. I could eat whatever I wanted. Now I'm a little older, and my muscles and hip and back say I don't need to run anymore. And I walk, and I can do that fine, but I've noticed I have to put in a little more time to help keep that weight under control. So when they're talking about moderate exercise, they're talking about brisk walking, usually about 3 miles an hour. It's a good pace for most of us. If you're younger, you might be able to do 4 miles an hour. Biking doesn't have to be really fast, but somewhere around 10 miles an hour to 12 is a good moderate stimulating exercise. Less than that, you can get good benefit too, just have to bike a little further. Or swimming laps. Another thing that I enjoy doing as I get older, takes the strain off of my muscle, my legs, my back, and whatever, and get some upper body exercise too. So it's nice to do different things. My wife likes active gardening, and she likes to get outside and work and do those kinds of things. That's good exercise too. Then the last thing it mentions, children also need at least 60 minutes or more of activity every day. That's when the body is growing. That exercise is stimulating for the heart and the lungs and the muscles, the bones. All of that is necessary if you want them to grow up and have good health. Now again, Ellen White talked about this probably 100, 150 years ago, a long time ago, but I think it's just as accurate as what we've been looking at in these scientific studies. It says, all who can possibly do so ought to walk in the open air 3 times a week. What does it say? Every day, summer and winter. Is that a little radical? That's what's recommended. It says walk even in winter would be more beneficial to the health than all the medicine the doctors may prescribe. Do you believe that? Well, after looking at its effect on the heart and preventing cancer and keeping the bones strong and all of those kinds of things, we can see it is good medicine, isn't it? In fact, the American Medical Association has started a special group amongst doctors to encourage this, and the group is called Exercise is Medicine. And at the medical meetings and things, they have meetings where they're encouraging doctors to talk to their patients about good exercise because it has such good benefits in so many different areas of our health. So when we're starting an exercise program, we need to start out with the kinds of activities we enjoy doing. I enjoy walking. Walking is something that most all of us can do. It's generally gentle on our joints and things, and so that agrees with most people. Biking is also excellent. And I think about these things as I'm getting a little older because, again, it takes the strain off the body and the joints. And I can bike a long ways and it doesn't hurt anything, and I like that. Swimming, also very easy on the body. And you can see other things there too. Sometimes people enjoy golf. They like walking, but they like to carry a few sticks and beat a little ball around the green pasture, and I think that's good too. And whatever you enjoy doing, whatever you'll keep up, what you'll do for a lifetime, that's what's good. Then there's more vigorous activities. If you're younger, or if you're older but you've been exercising a lot, you want to be more vigorous, then there's some of those kinds of things we can do over there, aren't they, including many active sports. I have a friend who's in his 80s. He still plays tennis 2-3 times a week. He goes biking with us. He's a great biker. He's a slim and trim and in good health and fit, and I think it's just amazing. So choose the activities that you're able to do, and then we need to do those a certain amount of time. And remember, the time was shooting for roughly half an hour to an hour a day. You might start at 10 or 15 minutes and gradually work up to that. Notice your exercise time doesn't have to be all at once. You can break it up. You might do it in 2 15-minute periods, or you might even do 3 10-minute periods. But as long as you exercise continuously for 10 minutes or so, do that 3 times a day, you'll get about the same benefit as if you did it all at once. And that oftentimes it fits into our schedule better. Maybe you do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at noon, 10 minutes at night, or maybe you do other combinations, just so you overall get that time accumulated that is your goal. So at least that much time, and if you invest a little more, they always tell us we'll get a little more benefit. Now the intensity. You want to go vigorously enough where you challenge the body, but you don't want to go so hard that we get fatigued, we get out of breath, and cause undue strain or fatigue. So a little thing that we always talk about when we're talking about exercise is this: how should your activity feel? And it should feel fairly easy to somewhat hard. In other words, it needs to be a little challenging, but not too hard. And the key thing to measure that is your breathing. Your exercise should cause you to breathe deeply, but you shouldn't be out of breath. If you're breathing so hard that you can't talk, you're going way too hard. You need to ease up a little bit. What'll happen if you go too hard is you won't be able to get your time in, because you get tired before you finish it. So keep it a little more moderate so you can get your time in, and it's also a little easier on your body. And working up a good sweat is also a good indicator that health benefits are occurring. As you exercise, your metabolism is working, your body core temperature actually builds up a little bit. That seems to help stimulate your health and your immune system and things too. And the sweating is an indication that you're getting cardiovascular benefit. So all of those are good signs. Now here's a little study that simply showed how important intensity is. Notice they're all walking, but people walked at different paces. This was, again, 72,000 people over 10 years. They'd been monitoring their exercise program. And those who walked at a slow pace, less than 2 miles an hour, that would be less than 30 minutes per mile. That's pretty much a stroll, isn't it? You can see the risk of heart attack there. Then the people who walked a little faster, 2 to 2.9. Well, if you're walking 3 minutes a mile, that'd be about 20 minutes. So if you're walking somewhere between less than 30, but about 20 minutes per mile, notice that made a significant drop in mortality. And then if you were walking 3 more miles an hour, that would be 20 minutes per mile or less. Notice you cut the risk of mortality of heart attack in half. So it shows very graphically, doesn't it, that intensity is important. Now intensity is relative, isn't it? Depends on how much exercise we've been doing in the past, how old we are, what things we may have, health problems or whatever. So use your own judgment, use the little intensity example that we talked about, breathing deeply but not out of breath, and do as much as you can and try to keep it brisk. As you get used to more exercise, sometimes you can go a little harder, but it's not necessary to exercise extremely hard unless you're a racer and you want to beat in the race and you're training for sport and athletics. And then, of course, if you're young and healthy, you can do that. Progression is an important principle. You want to start with moderate activities you can do without getting out of breath, that are fairly light to somewhat hard, and then gradually build up. I remember one large lady that I worked with. She was quite heavy. She had high blood pressure. Her doctor sent us to exercise because he had been giving her blood pressure medicine. He couldn't get it down. So we said, okay, you've got to exercise very carefully. We're just going to walk. We'll just walk for 5 minutes, and then we'll stop and rest. So we had a track around the hospital where I was working at that time, and we walked for 5 minutes, and we'd sit down on the bench, and we'd rest a little bit. Then we got up, walked for another 5 minutes, and then we sat and rest again. We did that 3 times. Pretty soon she was doing that in the morning and in the evening. And as the days went by, she got to going a little further. Pretty soon she was up to 10 minutes at a time, to where she was getting a half an hour. And by the end of 12 weeks, which was the course of fitness that we were doing there, she was walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. She had lost 20 or 30 pounds. Her blood pressure was way down, and the doctor had cut her blood pressure medicine in half. So it's fun to see those kind of benefits that happen. But you have to start within your capacity and gradually build up. Might take weeks, might take months. I remember one lady we worked with, it took 3.5 years. She wanted to be a runner. It took 3.5 years before she could run steady 1 mile. Within 6 months of that time where she accomplished that goal, she ran her first marathon. So it takes time sometimes for the body to get stronger and build up. You need to be patient, but don't overdo. Of course, if you have a heart problem or other serious problems such as diabetes or whatever, it's important to get your doctor's clearance first, isn't it? And talk to them about it, how much exercise you can do, what you want to do, and have them help you get a good program. Now, the American Heart Association and the American College of Sports Medicine made this statement on medical clearance. It says, most adults do not need to see their physician before starting what kind of a program? A moderate intensity physical activity program. That would be like walking or something, biking, easy biking, swimming. But if you're a little bit older, or if you have any chronic disease problems, still, it's good to talk this over with your doctor, make sure it's safe for you. Now, next part is strength and flexibility. Another type of exercise. As we get older, we tend to lose our muscle mass. I learned recently that after you reach the age of 60 or so, you begin to lose about 1% of your muscle mass per year if you're not exercising and doing strength training. And so if you want to stay strong your whole life, if you don't want to become feeble, end up in a nursing home or a rest home where people have to take care of you, then having strength exercises is important too. And of course, it's important for how we look and how we function all our life. Notice some of the benefits there. Protects against back pain and injuries. You ever have back pain? You see, as you keep the muscles strong and the tendons strong and so on, they protect those joints, and so we have less chance of injury. It prevents the loss of muscle mass. We'll look at a slide in a minute and show that maintaining our muscle mass as we get older is extremely important for survival. It helps you to look better, improves your figure and your physique, and it helps you to prevent disability, as we mentioned, as we get older. So try to find a variety of exercises that can strengthen the arms in all different areas, maybe some push-ups or the what do they call that, the one the lady's doing there, the plank. From your tiptoes to your arms and holding that, for a minute or so. These are all ways of strengthening the muscles, in that particular case, the core muscles, and something for the abdomen, and something for the legs, something for the arms. And as we challenge all of those systems, then they'll stay stronger and function better all your life. When you're first starting, you may want to talk to a trainer, maybe at the gym or whatever, and help you design some programs, take some classes, and then you can often do these at your home as well as what I generally do now. But just look at these couple of slides here on strength and even mortality. You wouldn't think that it would have an effect, but it does. And here's a study of nearly 4,000 people for 13 years. And in this case, notice they looked at sit-ups. And those who had a low score, their mortality rate, and those who had a high score in the green. Notice that difference? Excuse me. That's a huge difference, isn't it, in mortality? And even something as simple as grip strength was a predictor of being able to live longer and lower mortality rates. So what these things are showing is that muscle mass is important for our health. Here's one on push-ups. We just came recently, last year, they did this large study, over 1,000 men, almost for 10 years. And they simply looked at how many push-ups they could do and then waited to see who had risk of cardiovascular disease. That would be heart attacks or strokes. And that is a pretty dramatic graph, isn't it? As the number of push-ups went up, what happened to their risk? It dropped significantly. So even if you could just do 11 or 20 push-ups, notice you dropped your risk of cardiovascular disease by 2/3. Quite a change, isn't it? Showing that lean body mass is important for our health, especially as we get older. So looking at that chart, how much would you want to do? Well, you can decide. But I figure we ought to do at least 20 or so push-ups at one time. So this is the chart that shows where they actually looked at your lean body weight. That's your muscle tissue primarily. And they divided people into two groups. Those in the bottom third, in other words, those who had the least muscle mass, and in the top third of the people who had the most muscle mass. And they followed these people then for 5 years, these were all seniors, to find out if it had an effect on mortality. And as you can see there, it's an amazing difference, isn't it? Those who had the most lean muscle mass had an 86% decreased mortality during those 5 years follow-up. Those are huge differences, aren't they? So it simply illustrates the fact that while we need cardiovascular exercise, we also need to do things for our strength to keep it up. So if you want to remain independent, have fewer limitations as you grow older, have good health, do muscle strength training at least 2 or 3 times each week, choose 8 or 10 exercises of the major muscle groups, and your fitness trainer can help you if you haven't been able to figure out how to do that. And do at least 8 or 10 repetitions of exercise for each of those exercises. And then as you get stronger, increase the weights a little bit. And just be careful not to overdo or overstrain, but gradually build up. And as you're doing that, you actually stimulate those muscles to grow so that instead of losing muscle mass as you get older, you can actually gain muscle mass. Even in people that are 60 and 70 years of age, they can show that regular strength training helps them to increase their muscle mass and their health. So let's look at a couple case studies. These are people that I've known over the years, and they've been quite amazing. This is Ben Levinson, lived up in Portland when I was in that area. And Ben went to the nursing home because he couldn't walk very well. He has lost his lean muscle mass. He was all bent over. He just kind of shuffled as he walked. He didn't have a very good gait at all, kind of had to hang on to things. And in the nursing home where he was, one of the fitness trainers says, Ben, if you come down to the gym, I'll help you develop an exercise program, and I think you can walk better. So Ben said, well, why not? So he went down and they started doing strength training and leg presses and different kinds of things and exercises to strengthen his back. And after a few weeks or a month, instead of being all bent over, he was standing up straight again. And instead of shuffling, he had a nice gait again because he had the strength to walk. And pretty soon he was walking 20 minutes a day on the treadmill and doing other strength training. And then 10 years after this time, when he was over 100 years old, 103, they had a senior Olympics at Portland. And he thought, well, I'd like to go down and join that. So he did. And he decided he was going to throw the shot put. And he set a world record for men over 100 years of age throwing the shot put. Now, he didn't have a lot of competition, but it simply is an illustration that if you're careful to maintain your strength and your health through fitness, even if you get to be 103, you might be able to join the Olympics and set a world record. Who knows? Here's another one, Mavis Lindgren. Maybe many of you may have known her. She lived in Southern California, quite an interesting lady. She didn't begin to exercise until she was in her 60s, and she started because she had serious health problems. She would end up in the hospital every winter with pneumonia and all kinds of problems, and the doctor said, Mavis, if you don't get in better shape, I don't think you're going to make it through the next winter. So she decided to do walking. And the further she walked, the better she felt. And pretty soon, one day, her son says, Mom, I signed you up for a 10K race. Wow, she thought, I've never done anything like that. I better get in practicing. So she began to practice, and she did this 10K race. That would be about 6.2 miles, and she found it was fun. The further again it went, the better she felt and the healthier she got. And pretty soon, she was running marathons. I was the president of a running club down here in California at that time, the Loma Linda Lopers. And she came on her 72nd birthday and ran a full 26-mile race. And I can remember yet, as she come across that line, she was standing up straight, she wasn't tired, her hair was hardly mussed up, and she was fit and having a good time in her life at 72. So it's amazing what had happened. And she went on. I've run, 8 or 10 marathons with her now over the years, several up in Portland, ran the New York Marathon together, several times at Los Angeles, an amazing lady. And I invited her to our hospital one time. I was director of health for the employees at the hospital, and we did meetings. And she gave her testimony. And one question I asked her, I said, Mavis, how often do you exercise? And she says, oh, I exercise every day. I says, well, there's probably some days you're tired, you don't feel well, or something, you don't exercise. And she thought for a minute, and she says, you know, I haven't missed a day of exercise in 8 years. Now that's quite a testimony, isn't it? I don't think I can say that for myself. I try to get out every day, but some days I may not make it. But she was very faithful. She was committed, and she did it, and she had good health. Remember why she started exercising? Because she had such poor health. And she has set many course records for marathons. Last one was at the age of 90 years of age. Now, you don't have to run marathons, but it did show that her whole life changed as she began to exercise, and she had such more energy and strength and was able to do these things. Now, here's the oldest woman to complete a marathon. She's also an Adventist lady. She lived up in Oregon, Gladys Burrell. And she finished the Honolulu Marathon at age 92, which was older at that time than any other person had ever done. I happened to be there that day and visited with her. We ran with her, and a very interesting lady. And she also started late in life. She ran her first marathon at age 86, when most people would be putting it aside. A nice lady. She was a Seventh-day Adventist who loved the Lord, and she lived to be over 100 years of age. So these things can help us achieve good health and enjoy the good health that God wants us to have. Well, the word commitment. Running the LA Marathon several times with this lady, Amy, says some people don't exercise because they say their feet hurt. You know, you can always find excuses. But Amy runs without feet. And you remember the old adage, it said, I complained about bad feet until I met the person without feet. So we do the best we can with what we have. We've had people in wheelchairs that start exercise programs, do tremendously well. They're still in the wheelchair, but they're feeling better. They lost weight, their strength has come up, their endurance is better, their blood glucose levels have been lower. We've seen a lot of changes in people. So just to summarize, when we do an exercise program, start with a warm-up, ease into your exercise, cool down gradually afterwards. As you ease in and out of your exercise, it helps to prevent strain, helps your body adjust gradually, and have less sore muscles and so on. You want to choose activities you enjoy that are within your capacity. If you enjoy them, you'll keep them up, won't you? And try to do at least 20 to 30 minutes most days. The guidelines that say any exercise has benefit. But if you can get up around the 20 to 30 or more most days, that 2.5 hours per week or 3 hours per week, that's where we get some of the best benefit. Keep the exercise moderate. Should be somewhat to moderate hard, but we shouldn't be exercising so hard that we can't talk. We should be able to breathe and be able to maintain that through our time period. And of course, start with easy to moderate activities, progress gradually, both in time and intensity, as you become more used to the exercise till you reach the goal that you want to reach. And then, of course, remember the strengthening and stretching at least twice a week is important to keep our muscles and our bones in good strength and keep up so they won't become feeble as we get older, and it helps us to survive. Remember that graph on survivability. So as we do these things, we can have the good health that God wants every one of us to enjoy. So think of this, be active for a lifetime. So you choose the activities you enjoy, keep it fun. If it's not fun, you're not going to keep it up. Don't overdo, because sometimes we can overdo and we become discouraged. We give it up. We need to set realistic goals, whatever it is you can do. As we said, any amount of exercise you can do, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, has benefit. And sometimes doing activities with your spouse or friends makes it more fun, makes it social. I know my wife and I, we both like to go out together, and we encourage one another, and that way we both keep it up. And I've also found that if you keep a written record, you have a goal. How many steps are you going to do a day? How many miles are you going to do today, or how many minutes? And I write it right on my calendar, and I've got a little diary that I've done for, the last 30 years or more, Every day I write it down. I see what my goal is, and I work towards it, and it just helps to keep me faithful in doing that. So these are some things that can help you to have exercise for a lifetime. Now, if you're following along in your book that comes with the class, Be Well for Life, the booklet, there will be a chapter on becoming more physically active. And this week you can read that chapter, review some of the things we talked about. It's a place where you can write in your goals and so on. And then remember, the goal this week is to do some strengthening and stretching, even if it's just a few, 1 or 2 exercises as you begin, building this into your lifestyle. And then get out and do at least 15 or 30 minutes of aerobic activities, such as brisk walking or biking or whatever it is you enjoy, at least 3 or 4 days per the week. You may start easy and build into it as it becomes easier for you. And then there's a place in your booklet to write down your daily activity on your physical activity log. As you start doing this over a lifetime, it can make a tremendous impact on your health. Now, one last thought. For spiritual fitness, I like this verse where it talks about walking with the Lord. We have a little plaque in our house. It says, "Stay fit, walk with the Lord daily." Jesus is attractive. He's full of love, mercy, and compassion. He proposes to be our friend, to walk with us throughout all the rough paths of life. So let's invite him. And in this last little quotation here, he says to us, "I am the Lord thy God. Walk with me, and I will fill thy path with light." So as we walk and become more fit, let's also walk with the Lord, take him with us, and enjoy the good life God wants us to have. Thank you.